Hi, everybody. Good Shabbos. Well, almost. Given the situations of the coronavirus, we are not able to meet for shul, as we know, but also we're missing out on a very important tradition, at least in my job, which is the Shabbat haGadol Dvar Torah. It is one of the two big Dvar Torahs of the year, the other one being Shabbat Shuvah. This one is supposed to be a serious discourse on the nature of Passover and a halachic question that we're facing. This sermon that I wrote is about being or feeling like we're out of control, and how actually that makes a lot of sense for Passover, because Passover is a holiday of freedom. So I'm going to use this opportunity, see this crisis as an opportunity, to do our first video podcast. This is a recording of the Shabbat haGadol Dvar Torah. You can put it on while you're cooking or while you're getting ready for Shabbos, or some background noise, so if you can nod off and take a nap or something. But here's the Dvar Torah I would have given. This Shabbat is called Shabbat haGadol, or Big Shabbos. And so, as we approach Passover, I want to ask a big question at the heart of the holiday. Pesach, as we know, is the holiday on which we celebrate and retell the story of the ancient Israelites' exodus from Egypt. Though later Jewish political movements like Zionism or socialism would reframe this famous narrative as one of Moses' heroic leadership or community organizing, the Haggadah, infamously, does not mention Moshe Rabbeinu even once. Indeed, against the Prince of Egypt movie, the story of the Exodus is not Moses' story. It's God's. The Haggadah makes this very clear. Commenting on a verse from Deuteronomy, "And the Lord took us from Egypt," the Haggadah explicates, not by the hands of the angel, not by the hands of an intermediary, but the Holy One, God's self. Key to the central narrative and theme of Passover is that God was directly involved with our liberation. This is a very striking and powerful message, communicating to a constantly downtrodden people that its welfare mattered enough to the Master of the universe to negate the lofty, transcendent vantage from on high and personally get involved. We would not be pawned off on some angelic gopher. We are the direct concern of the divine. However, as modern Jews, does this put us in an odd position? From a philosophical perspective, the narrative at the heart of Pesach makes a strong claim about providence, the fancy theological term for God's direction of creation. That God indeed is directly involved with affairs on earth, that God intervenes in history. Coming from a post-Holocaust perspective, such activist theological frameworks are a bit harder to swallow. But then, where are we left when Seder night comes? In my opinion, we often give our ancestors and forebears too little credit. We act as if we are the first ones to come up with these kinds of questions, but as the great anthropologist of science Bruno Latour once said, we have always been modern. So I hope you are relieved to know that you have allies in this struggle, that these kinds of questions and provocative problems have been raised before, and those of us who have had such niggling thoughts or worries, unraveling threads can feel some solidarity, even comfort. The question of our personal relationship to this tale is central to the entire mechanism of the Seder. It's a curious and amazing thing. The main action we are tasked to perform on Pesach is not bodily, like the lulav, the sukkah, or lighting Hanukkah candles, but rather it's discursive. It's discourse, it's verbal, it's intellectual. We are asked to tell a story, and to expound on it, unpack it, make it last all night. Rabbi Gershon Chanech of Radzin, from whom we'll be learning soon, I love this man's Torah, commented on the child who did not know how to ask. He wrote, "One who learns words of Torah who is not challenged by them to prompt a problem, this is a clear sign that they have not really touched Torah at all. Authentic Jewish engagement is not to be secure in one's relation to what we inherit. All we are given is to disturb us, to provoke us, to prompt active response. If one leaves Torah study without being troubled, one is not really learning Torah at all. The Sod Yesharim is highlighting that the real capital of the Beit Midrash has always been problems, kashias, catalysts for incredible feats of intellectual acrobatics and athleticism. In context, he is most likely not referring to moral or philosophical problems. Most likely he's talking about textual issues. However, he says something that I believe can and should be applied universally. The sign of true engagement with Torah is effort. Someone who has truly touched or been touched by Torah is motivated by the problems they have encountered, such that they must strive to entangle them and craft new paths of contact. He reminds us that the Seder was intentionally designed to provoke questions from attending children, that is, appearing anew to all who witness it. One way to respond to something confusing or problematic is to shut down or split oneself. The effort or strain required feels like it's too much, so we turn away. Torah tells us otherwise. If you're feeling problems, it means it's working. Indeed, especially on Pesach, we don't have license to turn away. In the Mishnah on Passover, we are given the command to be personally involved. It reads, "In every generation, a person must see themselves as though they personally had gone out of Egypt. As it is stated, and you shall tell your son on that day, saying, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt." This is a baffling instruction since, as we discussed above, the central act of Passover is retelling a historical narrative. Ah, says the Mishnah, it's not really history since it's not really in the past. It's happening right now, and it's happening to you. This is a very beautiful idea that we all must develop and commit to on a personal relationship to the story of the Exodus. And that it is not consigned to the dustbin of history, but that it is something that still speaks to us today. However, it seems to be saying something more than that. According to the Mishnah, we must see ourselves as if we left Egypt. What does this kind of self-regard mean? Is it mere rhetoric, or is this teaching getting at something deeper? I think you've gotten to know me well enough by now to know that I always opt for the latter option. Well, again and again and again, our confusion and astonishment is never truly novel. Our rabbis have been productively baffled by this injunction. What does it really mean to see oneself as if one left Egypt? In a sense, our Seder is supposed to be a time machine, launching us back to that propitious moment of liberation, or perhaps transposing the advent of our freedom to the here and now. The Mishnah gives us the challenge that we must see ourselves as if we too left Egypt, but on Seder night, we sit this year not with our friends and family, but with a smaller group, or with ourselves, and we enjoy a meal. Thank God, though, still connected and ensconced in a nation that protects our rights and freedoms. At least politically speaking, we're already free, but experientially speaking, I think a lot of us are not feeling so free right now. So perhaps this year it's quite easy to say, I too left Egypt, or I am hoping, please God, to leave our quarantine Egypt soon. And we don't maybe this year have such a hard time connecting that thirst for freedom to the text. But perhaps we're misunderstanding the Exodus from the outset. If we are placing it in a political or external setting, the Maharal of Prague, mystic of 16th century Bohemia and legendary creator of the golem, thought otherwise. In his book on Pesach, Gvurot Hashem, he takes note of the incompleteness of political redemption in the aftermath of Egypt. He writes, one could pose the challenge. Of what good is the Exodus for us, since we are still oppressed in other regimes? Or this year, we are still constrained by the coronavirus. How is Mitzrayim different from those other regimes? But that's rubbish. That's not the right way of thinking about it, he says. When Israel left Egypt, they received an essential good, that they saw themselves as being free from their own sense of worth.